In 2025, one observation makes you think. 65% of people entering retirement admit that they have done nothing but work their entire lives. This figure shows how deeply rooted the idea is that happiness is always somewhere ahead, and the daily grind eats up everything else. Promises that tomorrow will be better, that today is worth enduring for the sake of the future, give many people strength. But they are also the ones that quietly kill dreams. This illustrates how the system forces us to settle for less and accept for granted a life dedicated only to fulfilling other people's expectations. No one is born with the desire to simply survive. But we are taught from childhood that real life will begin later. First, the duty to study, then the need to choose a career, find a stable job, start a family, buy a home. There is always a new step that seems to guarantee the long-awaited reward that never comes. Over time, people begin to perceive the present as something that needs to be experienced in order to finally achieve later. But then it goes further and further away, and today remains on the sidelines. This mindset that happiness will only be in the future turns into a trap that millions fall into. Years are spent on monotonous everyday life, striving to do everything right, waiting for the moment when everything will make sense. But more often than not, this moment never comes. The present becomes a zone of endless sacrifices, where the goal is simply to live up to other people's expectations. Meanwhile, real life with what is truly important is postponed for later. The most dangerous thing about this trap is its deception. It looks like responsibility, maturity, a sensible choice. This is how we learn to suppress our inner protest and move on. But every day spent waiting steals a part of ourselves. Because we are not created to live only in hope for tomorrow. The present must not only be experienced, it must be lived. The culture of eternal expectation forces us to exchange what is valuable for the illusion of security that rarely comes true. You work tirelessly, agree to exhausting schemes, forget about what you love. All this for the sake of the idea of success that was imposed on you. But no one warns that when this future finally arrives, many lack the health, strength, or desire to return to what they missed. So it's important to understand that this habit of waiting is not harmless. It costs a lot, takes time that can never be returned, takes away opportunities that will never be repeated, destroys relationships that could be stronger. Every moment lived for someone else's goals is a moment that will never be repeated. And when you realize this, it becomes clear, you can spend your whole life without ever having time to feel it. If you look deeper, it becomes clear that this eternal race for just a little bit more did not arise by chance. There is a system that feeds it. It shapes our priorities, where it is more important to be comfortable than to be ourselves. It all starts at school, where we learn to compete and obey without asking unnecessary questions. And it continues at work, where only productivity is valued, and rest is considered a weakness, and feeling is almost a crime. From childhood, we are taught to measure our worth in hours worked and bills paid. We are trained to fit into schedules, fulfill other people's plans, and live up to the expectations that are imposed on us. No one tells us that life can be any other way. No one tells you that you can live without sacrificing joy and curiosity. The hardest thing is to see that this system only lasts because we believe in it. It exists as long as we don't ask questions and accept as a given that there is only one way, to stick to a regime, work more and more, put off your dreams until tomorrow, because everything will pay off later. This is how an endless cycle is born. You wake up, do what you are told, return home exhausted, and everything repeats itself. Day after day, with no room for your own desires. This system does not need people who ask questions. She needs people who are tired and obedient. those who confuse stability with real life. Therefore, any desire to stop is perceived as a threat. After all, rest gives time for reflection, and reflection can show that much that seemed right has already lost its meaning. But even if we were taught to live exactly like this, the truth still breaks through. It can be heard in that empty feeling that remains after identical weeks, in the body that hurts when the soul is forgotten, in sleepless nights when you know that tomorrow will be the same. Life doesn't fit into a table or a schedule. And when we ignore it, the price comes, in anxiety, in apathy, in melancholy, because it is impossible to explain. When the days merge into one, the body and mind begin to give signals. It is impossible not to hear them. First, pains come without any apparent reason, heaviness in the head, a tight chest, a stomach that is always anxious. Then the internal screaming, insomnia, absent-mindedness, sudden attacks of anxiety increase. These aren't weaknesses, they're warnings. They tell us that this way of life is no longer sustainable. We're taught from childhood that complaining is a sign of weakness, that fears are normal, and that anxiety is an inevitable part of a fast-paced world. But in reality, all these are clear signals that someone inside us is asking for help. When the body and mind can no longer take it, they scream. And they show that there is a part of us that is forgotten and crushed by the constant race. The most dangerous thing is that these signs are easy to ignore at first. It seems that it is enough to get enough sleep on the weekend or take a short vacation. But if the reason for the malaise is how we live in general, rest will not change anything. By returning to the same routine, the same roles and responsibilities, we only start the cycle again. These signals are not just from fatigue. They indicate that we have become too distant from ourselves. The body is sensitive to when the mind tries to pretend that everything is fine. The soul understands when we stop dreaming and feeling. And it is pointless to try to drown out these signs with pills or distraction. They won't go away because they're not the problem. They're life's way of telling us it's time to change something. When we start hearing these signals, something shifts inside us. The realization comes that such a life is too expensive. It becomes clear that one can no longer agree to an existence in which everything comes down to work, bills and endless chores. At this point, the question arises, which can no longer be pushed aside: what do I really want? In the next part, we will talk about how this internal discomfort can be turned into energy for change. Because living forever tired is not destiny. And these frightening symptoms are actually just the beginning of the path to a life that has meaning. Towards a life where body and soul finally hear each other and no longer need to shout to be heard. When we understand that the body and mind are asking for change, the next step is to reclaim what we once left behind. No sudden turns or grandiose plans are needed. It all starts with simple decisions that give you back control over each day. Deciding to pause, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Deciding to say no to things that don't resonate with you, no matter how small. The power of a meaningful life is found in these simple actions that change everything. When you no longer put off the important for later, every minute becomes filled with new meaning. When you allow yourself to feel the sun on your skin or drink a cup of coffee in peace, routine ceases to be a cage. Such decisions bring back the lightness we have almost forgotten. Reclaiming the present does not mean giving up everything and disappearing. It means stopping putting off what is important and taking your life back step by step. It means appreciating what makes you feel alive. Spending time with those you love, doing things that light your heart, being able to do nothing and feel yourself again. The hardest thing is to stop, because we were taught to always rush. But even a small pause opens up a new space, a space where you hear what you really want, without the pressure of other people's expectations and strict boundaries. And it is in this space that real change begins. In the next part, we will talk about how courage is found when we decide to no longer live on autopilot. About how to stop playing the roles that society imposes on us and become ourselves, with all the imperfections and truths that make us human. After all, the present only makes sense when it is lived in your own way, and not as others demand. After many years spent in other people's roles, there comes a time when you should ask yourself, do I still need them? This is one of the most difficult decisions a person can make. It's much easier to continue acting out of habit, but such a life is like carrying someone else's burden. When you decide to stop pleasing everyone and start choosing for yourself, something changes inside. The first thing that comes is fear. Fear of being judged, fear of losing the place you occupied. Fear of losing the approval you thought you needed. But the courage to give up these roles comes from realizing that if you continue to live like this, you lose yourself. Caring about who you are is not selfishness, it is honesty. Recovering authenticity is not an overnight process. It is a journey that begins with simple recognition. Your life doesn't have to live up to someone else's expectations. It doesn't mean dropping everything and running away. It means choosing what's important every day. Remind yourself that you have the right to change your mind, to discover something new, to make mistakes and to start again. When you start to destroy other people's scenarios, you realize that many of your fears do not belong to you. They were other people's opinions, imposed judgments, demands that had nothing to do with you. And then comes relief. Life becomes brighter when you no longer have to pretend. The smile becomes real again. Conversations are free. And each, even the smallest, your selection now has a different weight. Because now you live not to please, but to really live. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel, Flow of Thoughts, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new helpful videos.